What's going on, everybody? I'm Average Joe and welcome to another Average video. Alrighty, in today's Average video we are going to be installing the EG4 GRIDBOSS, and of course I do have to give the precautionary warning. If you're not comfortable doing electrical work, I shouldn't have to say this, but seek professional help and talk to a qualified electrician, hire them, all of that kind of fun jazz. This technically isn't a how-to video, but it's more or less how I am going to be installing this. I think it's going to be episode 4 in the EG4 GRIDBOSS FLEXBOSS installation, series of videos. First one was updating all the firmware for the GRIDBOSS, the FLEXBOSS21, and the optional LCD screen. Video 2 was installing the FLEXBOSS21, and then I did like a 2.5 where we went over a bunch of FLEXBOSS21 settings through the web portal. And then I kind of threw in video 3. That was installing a battery expansion for the Ethos, basically expanding the battery backup system. And then obviously this is going to be video 4 where we install the EG4 GRIDBOSS. Okay, now if you're not familiar with what the FLEXBOSS21 is or the GRIDBOSS, I have a whole nother video on that subject all by itself, and I'll link that down below if you want to see it. But just a quick little explanation of what this does or what this is it's called an MID. That is a micro interconnect device, I think. I'll have to look in the manual that I had to download and print because it doesn't come with one. Microgrid interconnection device. So what this does is whenever you get something like this, you're able to connect all of your solar related equipment to one box versus having, a bunch of other combiner boxes and disconnects and a whole mess of other crap that you don't actually need. You can connect everything to this one box right here. That's basically what this does. And it saves you, a little bit of money in the process. So another cool thing about this box right here is it is service entrance rated. So what that means is you can come directly from your utility company, like right outside, and you can come right into here. And that's what we're gonna be doing today, is we're gonna come directly from the meter and go into the EG4 GRIDBOSS. And then on the backed up loads port, we're going to come out of that and then feed the main electrical panel. So then we can run our entire house off of solar, battery, stuff like that. And of course, there is a couple different ways that you can hook this up to your house or property. First one, again, like I said, is you come directly from your meter outside and go directly into this box. If you do that, you're gonna need a specific circuit breaker that we're gonna install right down here. Basically, you have to have a disconnect in there. And this is a CSR2200N Eaton breaker. I'll show you this here in just a little bit. I think this cost me like $130 or something like that. You can get it right off of Amazon or you can get it from Signature Solar now. At the time I bought it, Signature Solar didn't offer it, but they do now. Anyway, so that is gonna be option 1, is coming directly from the grid into the GRIDBOSS. You're gonna need the circuit breaker. Or if you already have like a main disconnect breaker outside near your meter, or maybe you already have one inside of here, you will not need this breaker right here. So it'll be $100 cheaper if you already have that disconnect. And of course, I do have to give you the good old disclaimer. If you're not comfortable doing electrical work or anything like that, make sure you seek professional help or hire a qualified electrician, because you are going to have to kind of coordinate with your utility company so they can come out and pull the meter, so you can, work on your main wires that come into the house. Alrighty, with that out of the way, let's get to it. So first thing we're obviously gonna have to do is mount the GRIDBOSS to the wall, and it's gonna be in this rough location. Now, they did include a bunch of the mounting hardware if you want to use that. I'm not going to. I'm just going to be using Tapcons, okay? So all we really have to do is mount the supplied bracket to the wall, and then we're going to hang the GRIDBOSS right on the bracket. Once we get that on, there is a couple of side mounts right over here. That mount right up here on the side, we're going to have to drill some holes for those as well. And one last thing that I'll mention is the GRIDBOSS and the FLEXBOSS and all that kind of stuff does not come with a printed manual. You have to basically, view the manual on your phone, or you can download it and print it off yourself, which is what I did. I'll be referencing this during my installation. Alrighty, let's get to it. Okay, we're gonna mount my GRIDBOSS in this rough location right here. We're sitting almost 1 foot away from my main electrical panel right here. In the installation manual, it says you need roughly 4 inches of clearance all the way around. First thing we're gonna do is mark the wall for the bracket right here. And this didn't come with a template, or if it did, I might have lost it. So this template's actually from the FLEXBOSS21. It is roughly the same. I just had to kind of trim the top down 1 1/8 inches, and then it actually kind of matches right up to the back of the GRIDBOSS. I did kind of roughly mark some of this out just so it would save me like a minute. That's about it. What I'm gonna try to do is make the top equal or level with my main electrical panel right over here. And we'll just drill a hole there, there, there. All right, got the wall marked. Let's drill some holes. Nice. The GRIDBOSS is not super heavy, so you can lift it up and put it on there by yourself. I do have kind of a messed up back, so I am gonna use my little hydraulic table. Basically, I'm just gonna set it on here and make sure it's, you know, the correct distance that I want, and then I'm going to fully tighten down those tap guns. There's actually quite a bit of play on the bracket, so you can slide the GRIDBOSS, you know, left or right. So if you need that room to, you know, put in your fittings or do what I'm doing right now, then there is room for that. Okay, let me pull this back off real quick and I'll tighten those tap cons down. For these little side brackets, I'm not going to tighten those down quite yet because I might need a little bit of play with the GRIDBOSS whenever we install the little tiny piece of conduit going from the GRIDBOSS over to the main electrical panel, which we're going to do next. So before we do that, actually, we need to remove all the covers. Of course, whenever you open this up, be careful. I'm not going to shut everything down quite yet. Next thing we're going to do is work on some of the conduit. And one thing I gotta mention real quick is the GRIDBOSS sits away from the wall pretty far. If you're using the 1.5 inches like I'm gonna be using, I'm sitting off the wall 2¼ inches. And if you take a look at the knockouts on your electrical panel, I mean, it sits pretty close. It's more like around 3/4 of an inch. It's quite a bit different. So you are gonna need a pretty big S, whatever you gotta do to make it up to the knockouts on here. And that's actually why we're sitting so far away. I couldn't get any more of an S in there without getting ripples, you know, whenever I was trying to bend this. This is what I'm working with right now because I already had most of this stuff from other projects. So that's what I'm using. So on the main electrical panel, I'm gonna be knocking out the 1.5 inches right over here, and same thing on the GRIDBOSS, 1.5 inches right here. This is gonna be a little tricky getting some of this in here with the existing wiring, but I am gonna be removing the EP cube from this panel right here, so these wires and stuff down here are going to go away. Okay. Boom, there we go. Got that piece of conduit in there. Got my little bushing covers and lock nuts on both sides. The next thing we are going to do is run a piece of conduit for the backed up loads right over here. So I think what we're going to do is probably knock out this one right over here, even though we have many other choices. I want to leave these open just in case I run other things, other inverters or whatever. I'll have room for this side. So anyway, we are going to come out of the grid on this side, come around, and then pop into that knockout right there. All right, so I just ended up drilling out 1-inch holes out of the knockouts that are already here because they are actually really nice and strong. One of these holes is going to be for the hybrid inverter or the FLEXBOSS21, so we're going to come out of that, wrap up here, probably to number 1, honestly. And then the other one is going to be for the communication wires. Those are going to come up and then up into the communication ports right over there. What I'm going to do next is start running the conduit for the FLEXBOSS21. Basically, it's just a small piece that's going to come down out of the GRIDBOSS, go over here off to the left-hand side, and then go up, and then meet up with the conduit that I already have going over to the FLEXBOSS. And then the same thing for the communication wires. Basically follow the exact same route. It's going to come up over here and then end up over there by the FLEXBOSS21. First one is going to be for the FLEXBOSS21. The second one's going to be for the communication wires. I bent both of these kind of identical, and I pulled them off and I forgot to mark them for which one went where. All right, those wires were a Bearcat, trying to get them through the 1-inch conduit. If I have any sort of suggestions for anybody else, use bigger conduit, or matter of fact, use one of those wireways, the trough that goes across the bottom. That'll make it so much easier. Anyway, next thing we're gonna do is hook up those wires. 2 of them are gonna go to the 90 amp breaker. Actually, we cannot do this quite yet because we need to install the main circuit breaker right over here, because we have to pull this off. If I install this right now, then I'll just have to pull it back off again. So this is what the main breaker is. Typically in your electrical panel, it'll be installed like this. Your 2 hots are going to come in there, and then these 2 right here are connected to the bus bars that go down, the center of your electrical panel. So in order for us to do that, we do have to take off this orange panel right here. There are 4 Phillips head screws, and then there's 2 nuts that are further back here. The size is a 7mm. All right, this is the location that we need, and we need to remove the 2 main lugs right here. If you don't need to install the circuit breaker, then of course you're going to mount your 2 main wires from the grid right here. But since we do need the circuit breaker, we need to remove these 2 bolts right here, and we actually need to remove the ones above that because we need to rotate these little plates that are back here so everything will line up correctly. And these are a size 10mm. We don't actually need these lugs. These are called like anti-rotation something or other. Basically, you just need to pull them off and turn them around so the little slots are facing up. I'm not going to tighten that all the way quite yet. We do need to bend that plastic out of the way, and we can slide in our circuit breaker. I'm going to just throw in one of these bolts to hold it up here. We also need to install that Phillips head screw on the bottom, which I will do right now. Let me get this one in. So now all we need to do is torque everything down, which I have to grab the torque specs out of the manual. Boom, there we go. All right, now that that is installed, we can put the orange cover back on. All right, now we can install the 90 amp circuit breaker on the hybrid port up here. But first we're gonna do the neutral. Technically we would install the ground first, but I do need to run a separate ground since I don't have one ran from over there on this set of wires, which I'll do here in just a little bit. So anyway, we will start with the neutral first. This one, right there. Boom, there we go. Pop that on there. So the lower one is going to be L2, which will be red, and then L1 is going to be black. Nice. Boom, there we go. L1 is black, L2 is red, and we're using a 90 amp circuit breaker. All right, next we're gonna do the communication cables. I ordered like a 300-foot roll of Cat 7 cable because it's shielded, and then I just cut it to the length I needed and then added, you know, 2 ends right on here. And I do have one of them marked on both ends so I know which port to plug into. And just a little side note, one thought I was having is, since it is shielded, you know, it has the metal ends on each side, and those are grounded on both ends. So it's, you know, one solid ground all the way through. And I was kind of thinking that it might create a ground loop, because you're only supposed to have one ground, which is your main ground right here, you know, going to each individual place. But once we add these, this is technically another ground. Not saying that any current would go on these, but it was a thought that I was having. So what I did whenever I put my ends on here is I removed the ground from the little casing on here just so it wouldn't create a possible ground loop. I don't know if it's a problem or not, but that's what I did. Okay, anyway, we need to run these up here. So we're going to be plugging into the top 2 ports right up here. And remember, one of them has to be, well, it doesn't have to be marked, but I'm going to be marking one of them. So I'm going to put my little white tape on the outer side for white out. That's how I'm going to remember it. All right, we just need to verify or make sure that these dip switches right here are in the down position, which is on. And that's how it was from the factory, so we don't actually have to do anything because they are in the down position. Next, we'll go over to the inverter. There we go. All right, here's our communication board right here. We're going to be going into these 2 ports right here. You can see right underneath it actually says parallel. For this one, I'm doing the white on the outside for white out, and the other one right here, and there is some dip switches here as well. All right, and we just need to verify these dip switches right here. It actually says parallel up there. We just need to verify that those are in the down position, which that's how it was from the factory, so we are good to go. Okay, also what I did off camera real quick was I removed the load wires right over here because those are not going to be needed anymore, and we only have the grid connection wires here, which is the other side connects to the GRIDBOSS. So I got my 2 hots, my neutral, and my ground right here. All right, the next thing is since this is going to be our main disconnect now, this is like our main panel, and we don't have a main electrical panel over here anymore. This is now going to be a sub panel. So we need to disconnect the ground neutral bond over in the main panel, and we need to make that over in the GRIDBOSS, okay? And in the GRIDBOSS, it did come with one of these little brackets in this little bag right here. It says, do not discard. This is your neutral ground bonding hardware. It's just a little tiny bracket that looks just like this. We're going to install that right down here, and we're going to combine the neutral and the ground so they become one. All right, so since our ground neutral bond is going to be in the GRIDBOSS, it no longer needs to be inside the main electrical panel. So we actually need to remove the little green screw that's up by the top. I'll show you here in just a second. And this part might be kind of a pain in the butt depending on how many circuits you have in your panel. Luckily, I don't have too many in this one right here because I have another sub panel off to the side. I need to separate all the grounds and neutrals, and I need to install a ground bar so I can run all the grounds to this, you know, off to the side, so they will be separated. I'll probably do this off camera since it'll probably take a few minutes for me to get all those separated, but I'll show you what it looks like whenever I'm done. But I will show you at least doing this ground neutral bond right here. In the GRIDBOSS, here's your main neutral and here's your ground, and we need to combine these two with that little bracket that I showed you. So all we need to do is remove this screw and this screw right here. This one looks to be a star bit, and then this one over here is just a Phillips. All right, the only bit that I have on hand right now is a security bit. It has a little hole in the center. It's a CR-VT-30. That's the only thing I have that I could find right now, so hopefully this will... Oh yeah, okay, that's not in there super tight, so we'll pull that one out. And then the other one is a Phillips, a number 2. Pop that one out. I think the holes are basically the same, so it doesn't really matter which way it goes in. Okay, in the bag of hardware that you get, it does come with a new bolt for that. It's just a little bit longer. So we'll swap that one out. Boom, there we go. And that one's actually a Phillips or probably a number 10. And then we'll just check continuity real quick from here to here. Boom, and we have it. All right, so this is or was my main electrical panel, and this is where my ground and neutral were bonded with that little green screw right up there. Basically what that does is it bonds the neutral bus bars, there's one on each side, and it bonds it with the case right here. Okay, so what we need to do, which I already did off camera, I just installed the bus bar right over here. There are numerous places that you can install these in your panel. You just have to get the correct bus bar for your panel and it'll fit perfectly. So that's all I did, is I removed the grounds from the neutral bar over here and separated them to their own ground bar right over here. My neutrals I didn't have to do anything with because they were already on the neutral bars. Okay, so the last thing I need to do to unbond this is remove that screw and unbond the panel. But I'm not going to do that quite yet because I'm going to wait until we actually lose power from the utility, which will be tomorrow. All right, we're almost done. The only thing we have left to do is run the main lines over from this circuit breaker over to the main lines right over here, and then for the backed up loads we need to run those ones going down underneath here and then loop around up to these terminals right here. We're just trying to work up to a point where we don't have anything left to do except for wait for the utility company to shut off the grid or pull the meter or whatever they got to do. All right, got my wires cut to length. If you are using the circuit breaker like I'm using, you can see right down here, it actually swaps your L1 and L2, so just keep that in mind. If you do not have the circuit breaker in there, it's gonna be normal L1 on the left and L2 on the right. And then of course your neutral is gonna be in the same place back here on the big ass neutral bar, which we will start with first. We'll do L1 first. This tab kind of looks like it's almost in the way. Yeah, it kind of is. Just be aware of that. If you're using a socket and stuff like I'm doing. Now you can't really see what I'm doing, but I'm just moving the wire around a little bit and then we'll come back and tighten it a little bit more. Yeah, just keep in mind that little tab's kind of in the way. Then our L2 is a little bit easier to get to. Careful when you're doing that too, you don't want to break anything. All right, got my ground wire ran. I am using black, but I'm marking it green, just they didn't have any more green at the store. Anyway, it took me a couple extra minutes for this one because it is a little bit longer run since I'm going to a bus bar, which goes out to the ground rod outside. But anyway, we will install that one next, and we will just plant that one right here next to the other ground. Boom. All right, there we go. This ground is technically going to be from grid, but it doesn't actually come from grid. It just goes out to the ground bar outside. We have our neutral from grid, L2 from grid, L1 from grid. All right, now we just have 4 wires left that we're going to get cut and mocked up, ready for tomorrow. And that's gonna be for the backed up loads over here. And again, I'll put that on a time lapse because it'll take a couple of minutes. All right, well, apparently I forgot to hit the record button for running the wires down through this piece of conduit over there, but you really didn't miss much. It was just me struggling with the big ass cables. Okay, all we need to do is hook up these 2 wires right here. These 2 are gonna be the 2 hots that go over and feed my main electrical panel, and those are gonna go right over here to the backed up loads, which would be these 2 right here. And again, these are also on a separate breaker all by itself. Basically, this is the manual transfer switch right here. So if this breaker is in the up position, it sends the grid power through these right here. And if this one is down and this one is up, this will be all of your inverter power. L2 is gonna be the red. Move them around just a smidge. Don't move them too much so you don't break it. Boom, there we go. I already have the ground and the, no, I don't have the neutral hooked up. We gotta hook that one up too. Give it a little wiggle, not too much. tighten it down, little wiggle, tighten it down. Neutral, which I probably should have done first, is going to be right back here, and it's going to be a bear cat to get in there. We'll push. And tight. And just FYI, these little protective covers do fit over this and slide up there into place quite nicely. All right, so we'll just do a quick little run through before we put the cover back on. These two are going to be the ones that come from the grid. Just like down here, it says L2 is on the left, so we have red on the left, and the other side is L1. I have the neutral back there on the neutral bus bar. All right, so power's going to come through here, do its magic throughout the thing, and then it's going to come out of the backed up loads right over here and go back to the main electrical panel so we can power the house. That neutral is also right over here, which we just installed, and then I have all of my grounds right back here. We do have the little strapping in here to make this a ground neutral bond box because this is the first box or the first disconnect in the system. The only other thing we have in here, of course, is the FLEXBOSS21 90 amp circuit breaker right here. And then on this side, of course, we have the main electrical panel, and we have a mess of wires just kind of hanging out the bottom over here until we have the grid shut off. And then we can basically remove the main wires coming in and splice those to make them longer. And then we will attach them to whichever wires they go to, which will feed the GRIDBOSS over here. And then the backed up loads, again, are going to come out, go around that bottom conduit right there. It's going to go up and go around this side most likely. And then, boom, we'll land it right into the top of the main electrical panel. And then we can power the entire house, basically from the FLEXBOSS21, which is going to be right over here. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, since this is no longer the first disconnecting means up here, the GRIDBOSS is now, this panel is no longer ground neutral bonded. So I had to add a separate ground bar right over here on the side. And then for the grounding of the main electrical panel, that is attached right down here. And that goes around over to this side and then attaches over here. So since we disconnected everything over there and separated it, and our GRIDBOSS is now going to be our main source of ground. So we do have a 4 AWG ground wire from the GRIDBOSS. It actually routes through here, and it goes out and it exits out to the ground rods outside, just where the main panel used to be. All right, well, that's pretty much where we're at right now. We have everything wired as far as we can go until the utility is shut down, which will be tomorrow. Boom, very next day, and power is shut down, but I still have power, of course, because I'm actually running off of the EP cube over here. That's what that little transfer switch is right over here. If you go up, that was the FLEXBOSS21. If you go down, it's the EP cube. So I'm running off the EP cube right now. Today's task, of course, is getting everything working. So all we need to do now is hook up my big mess of wires right up here, which shouldn't really take but a couple of minutes, I hope. So what we need to do first, of course, is we're going to verify that there's no voltage or anything like that. 0 volts, hopefully you can see that. Power is shut down. First thing we gotta do is pull the main lugs out of here and then splice them onto the other cables. And I'll be using these Polaris connectors right here. Basically, the grid is gonna go on one side and our extension is gonna go on the other side, so we can go over to the GRIDBOSS. All right, that's basically it. Let's get to it. We need to disconnect these right here. And also, before I forget, we need to remove our bonding screw right here. So we'll do that real quick so I don't forget. The bonding screw is removed. Oh, that wasn't too bad. Come on. There we go. Got it. Okay. Twist them on, so hopefully that twists all the wires together. I'm just going to put all these on right now. That's good. I'm just going to go ahead and connect that one. What do I do with my wrench? I'm going to do that one while I'm here since it fits good. Okay, I think those ones are good. Just got to put in the little tiny caps. Probably put some zip ties on all these to kind of hold them in place. Okay, next thing we got to do is take the remaining 3 wires, the 2 hots and the neutral, from the backed up loads port on the GRIDBOSS and land those right up here so we can, of course, power the main panel. It is going to be very, very tight. Okay, I don't know what's going on with my camera. It just stops recording or what. I don't even know where we left off. All right, I'm not really sure what's going on with my camera and or when I started or stopped recording last. So I'm just gonna start over. We do have grid power back on. The grid power is not over here anymore, of course, because we extended the wires and we're now going over to the 200 amp breaker right over here. This is our main disconnect now. And we can check voltage on that real quick just to make sure. And we're sitting at 245 volts, which is exactly what we want. Okay, so the next thing we got to do is put on the front cover. But before we do that, I did want to mention real quick is there is a bonding point for the door to the frame back here. And it doesn't come with a wire. It doesn't even come with screws. You have to actually find your own screws, and I just happened to find some in a little scrounge bin that I had. Anyway, I did add a 10 gauge wire over here. It's THHN, it's in green, so now my door is bonded to the frame. Alrighty, so the next thing we gotta do is put our front cover on, and I did remove the little plate right here. All you have to do is basically wiggle it back and forth until it pops out, and then you're done. And then the other thing that I did was remove the plate that was covering up this hole right here, so we have access to our main circuit breaker right there. Boom, easy peasy. Okay, the next step basically says we need to configure the hybrid inverters, which technically they should already be somewhat configured, except for like 1 or 2 boxes that we need to check. And that's going to be enable GRIDBOSS. The other thing which we did in video 1 was make sure all the firmware was up to date. I have done that again with the FLEXBOSS21. There was another one since that last video, so I would imagine there's actually another one for the GRIDBOSS, so I might have to do that again. Yeah, so in here it says we need to go over to the hybrid inverter and check those boxes. So over here at the FLEXBOSS21 screen, you can also do this through the web portal app, but we're just going to do it right here on the screen. So we're going to go over to settings, go to advanced, and then we're going to scroll down to the bottom where it says GRIDBOSS. We're going to check that. Caution, you're about to enable GRIDBOSS. Please make sure that the GRIDBOSS is installed and connected properly to your inverter. Otherwise, it could damage your equipment. As far as I know, we are properly connected. So I'm going to go ahead and check that. We're going to set it. I did hear a click on the FLEXBOSS. After you have the GRIDBOSS enabled, next step is switch the GRIDBOSS hybrid inverter breakers to the on position. This should power the GRIDBOSS using the inverter's grid power as a power source. If the GRIDBOSS enable setting was not enabled in the previous step, the GRIDBOSS will not power on. So all we really need to do now is flip on these breakers right here. Oh, there we go. I was waiting for a light to show up. We got a hybrid light on down here. Next step is basically making sure that you have all of your grid cell back, or if you're not selling back, make sure all of those are configured correctly. Here at my place, we're not selling back to the grid or anything like that. We're keeping everything in-house. So I am not exporting, and I have the fast zero export box enabled. That's what it's asking you to do. Alrighty, next step is enable the grid input to the GRIDBOSS by turning on the grid breaker, which is this one right here, if you have it equipped. Boom, we have grid power now. Visually inspect the GRIDBOSS front panel LEDs. Grid and hybrid LEDs should be solid green, which at the moment they are. This is where it asks you to share battery and GRIDBOSS, so we'll go back over there and check that again. All right, so we're back over here at the FLEXBOSS21, and we're gonna re-verify that we have grid enabled and the share battery is checked. But one thing we can see right now is we have a little chain link and it says GRIDBOSS right over here. So that's brand new and kind of cool at the same time. Anyway, we're gonna go over to the settings, advanced. And these are my settings right now. So grid output, seamless switch. Yeah, that's all I have right now for this spot. Scroll down. Yeah, all of that is the exact same as previously. And we'll scroll down. So we do have GRIDBOSS checked. Hit the share battery. Oh, there it goes. Set. Set fail. Okay, I'm not sure why it's not letting me do the share battery part. I'm pretty sure it needs that enabled because it needs to access basically all the information. Anyway, we will probably check that again through the web portal app. All right, so now we're at my computer. We're gonna take a look at the EG4 web monitoring app. Alrighty, so we're at the main screen right here. Basically what I wanna do real quick is see if there is a software update. So we're gonna hit maintenance real quick. We'll hit the remote update and we're going to find the GRIDBOSS, which I think it is this one, and there is one update. So we're going to update that real quick. Boom, 100%, and it is a success. Now in the manual, of course, it tells you to basically re-verify all of that stuff. So that's what we're going to do real quick. Boom, we're back at the main screen. You can see we do have grid power coming in, but this is all it's gonna show because we need to configure or like parallel sync the hybrid inverter with the GRIDBOSS. Put both dongles under the same station. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do next. But first, let me go to the maintenance tab and just read everything in here and make sure our firmware version is up to date. 1AAB 1600. Let me go back to remote update and make sure that is the correct one. All right, so we are fully up to date. So I'm gonna hit maintenance, I'm gonna hit read, we're gonna scroll down and we're going to hit normal. Don't want off-grid mode at the moment. Okay, we'll enable this one. Wait for it to, there we go. And then we'll enable seamless switch. Grid sellback is disabled and fast zero export enabled. Boom, there we go. I don't know if we need to set all this stuff down here. Lithium, state of charge. I just heard a click on the inverter. State of charge, shared battery, enable. State of charge system, I think that needs to be like 101%. Yeah, 101, we'll set that. Off grid cutoff, I'm gonna set this down to, I usually go down to like 15. And then the on grid, I currently have it set for 25. Okay, so we're gonna go to the main screen and we're gonna flip over to the FLEXBOSS21, and right over here it says parallel sync. We're going to hit that. Boom, there we go. And now everything should read on this page right here, if I'm not mistaken. When we should see the FLEXBOSS21 right here, but I'm not seeing it right now. But it does say normal up here, which is really, really good. I'm pretty sure the FLEXBOSS is supposed to show up right there, but it's not. And I'm not showing voltage down here, or watts, or anything like that. Alrighty, I guess the next thing we can do is flip on the backed up loads circuit breaker to on, which will send power over to the lugs right over here, and we'll check voltage, and if there is voltage there, we will flip the main breaker to my house. Let's do it. Here we go. Boom, 242 volts. Alrighty, actually I need to switch us back off over here. So this is the EP cube shutting off. That one is on, and now we're gonna do the entire house. Here we go. Boom. All right, now we are running off, well actually we're in battery backup mode, so we're using grid at the moment. But we do have power to the rest of my house, which is fan-freaking-tastic. So the next thing I need to do is get this all buttoned up. I'm gonna try to shove that Emporia system back in here if I can get it to fit. Okay, I'm gonna shut the door here and I'm gonna get all this buttoned up and then I'll be right back. Alrighty, it is like 9 or 10 days later and I had to edit another video and then I started editing this video. And there's a few things I want to clear up through the web portal whenever I was doing my setup. And I haven't seen anybody else show basically setting everything up. So some of it was kind of a guess. So a couple things that were a guess, at least for my system, since I only have one inverter, I do not have to hit the share battery option. In the manual, it kind of makes you think that you need to enable share battery, but you don't actually have to do that if you have one inverter, which I only have one inverter. So I went ahead and disabled that option. And then there's another thing for the parallel sync on the home screen up here. If you remember a couple of minutes ago in the video, in order to combine the FLEXBOSS21 or whatever hybrid inverter you're using With the GRIDBOSS, you would hit the parallel sync button on the left-hand side of the screen, and that will combine everything into one screen like we're seeing right here. You don't have to hit that option if you don't want to. If you like switching back and forth from the FLEXBOSS to the GRIDBOSS, then don't hit that button. I guess I don't really care if I have to switch back and forth, but the nice thing is when they are combined is you don't have to switch back and forth, and everything just shows right here on the screen, just like you see right here. You can see all of your PV input, all of your information right here. Basically everything you want to know is right there. It just looks a little bit different than seeing the FLEXBOSS21 all by itself. And then there's one other thing I need to clear up. As you can see right now, it's only showing one inverter. Basically what happened whenever I hit the parallel sync button, whatever inverter that you have assigned to your station, all those inverters are going to sync and kind of show up on the main screen here. So I had just the FLEXBOSS21, but I also had a 6000 XP online, and it synced with that one as well. It showed like 3 inverters connected up, which I obviously didn't have 3 inverters connect up. So a little bit later, I realized that that could have been the problem. So I went up to configuration, and then I went up to stations, and then I just added a new station just like you normally would, okay? And then once I had the new station in there, I went to devices and found the 6000 XP, and then I went over here to management, and then I rebound the station to the new station. After that, when I went back to monitor, it actually didn't change anything. A couple days later, I called Signature Solar's support line and asked them if they would take a look at my settings just to make sure I had everything right. And the very helpful woman named Kirsten did a fantastic job of taking a look at everything and letting me know that basically I had everything right. And she was also the one that told me I didn't need to enable share battery, or I didn't even have to do the parallel sync. If you don't want to. If you have them enabled, it's not going to hurt anything, but you just don't have to with a single inverter. Anyway, whenever I would switch stations up here to the 6000 XP, it also showed a whole bunch of inverters kind of like paralleled together. And there was nothing I could really do on my end, so she was actually able to fix it on her end. I'm not exactly sure what they had to do, but I'm just letting you know if you happen to do the same thing that I did, where you have multiple inverters under the same station, one of them maybe being a 6000 XP, just call their customer support line and explain to them that's what you did. You parallel synced with everything under the same station, and you would like whatever inverter removed, and they can go ahead and take care of you. She did say that maybe in the future that'll be something that we can do on our end, but for right now I guess we cannot do that. So anyway, that was a little hiccup that I had on my end. And then I guess the last thing I could show you real quick is all of my settings again, because I don't know, I might have changed a couple since then. Okay, so we're gonna go to my FLEXBOSS21. We are going to read the station. Okay, so I'm not going to go over every single thing. Basically, if you want to copy what I have here, that would be a great start. And then you can make adjustments, you know, after you're up and running. Up here, you have an old setting page and you have a working mode page. I am under the working mode option. So we'll start with the application settings. So under basic mode, for normal standby, we want to use it, so we're in the normal mode. I did enable off-grid mode, and that was a recommendation from Kirsten. Basically, she was saying that if you don't want to have any grid interaction whatsoever, then you should enable that. Basically, if it is not disabled, sometimes whenever you turn on large loads and shut them off, you know, it takes a second for the inverter to cancel that out. So sometimes you're going to pull a little bit of grid, and sometimes you're going to push a little bit back. So if you're in the off-grid mode, none of that is going to happen. And that's exactly what I want. So I did enable off-grid mode. Okay, and I think that was basically it on this. We'll click on advanced settings real quick. So we do have GRIDBOSS enabled, obviously, which we had to do during the system setup. Here is that parallel setting data sync. It is now disabled. It's not going to hurt anything if it is enabled. This is mainly if you have multiple inverters in parallel, which I do not. I didn't have to do really anything else on this page right here at all. Under the working mode setting, we are in the self-consumption mode. This is green, and you can see that up here. For the active mode, we have a green bar basically going across the entire screen. And one thing that Kirsten did recommend me enabling is the AC charge mode, just in case we get down to your lower percent state of charge. It'll actually start recharging if you want it to. I do want it to, because I always want to at least have a little bit in there just in case the grid goes out. So I did enable the AC charge function right here, and I only put it to 1 kilowatt. I might change that later on, but I just threw it on 1 for right now. And I have the AC charge based on state of charge. My start AC charge is set for 20%, so if the batteries get down to 20%, basically pull from the grid. And then I have it stopping at 60% state of charge. If you need to do it based on voltage or time, of course, you can set that off to the right-hand side, and I'm not gonna do anything like that. I'm just gonna base everything off of percent state of charge. If you do have it enabled like this and you just wanna charge it for some reason, all you need to do is go in here and change the start AC charge state of charge to something higher than what your battery percent state of charge is currently. So right now my battery's pretty low, it's like 40%. If I wanted it to start charging right now, I would just change it to like 45% as an example. That is basically it. I don't have anything else enabled in this little area. And down here, if you would like to see that, battery settings up here, this is mainly for your battery type that you have. Again, right here, share battery, that is disabled. If it is enabled, it's not gonna hurt anything. All of my charging and discharging, again, is based on state of charge. My system charge limit, I have it set to 101%. That's basically what it's set at the factory. If you only want to charge up to 90%, then this is where you're going to change that right here. I try to use basically every bit of battery power that I can. So I'll fully charge it, and I just don't care. Same thing over here for the discharging side. I have off-grid cutoff state of charge. I lowered that down to 5%. That is basically if we actually lose grid power and we're running off of battery power only, the inverter is going to shut off at 5% state of charge. And then for the on-grid cutoff, again, that is at 20%. Basically, whenever the batteries drain down to 20% and we do have grid available, we will start charging at 20%. And then down below that, there's really nothing left for right there. Boom, we're back at the main screen, and that is basically it. We have the EG4 GRIDBOSS right here in the center, and right over here is going to be the FLEXBOSS21. You can see currently we're pulling in only 1300 watts, and that is passing straight through because a little over 2000 watts right now. Battery percent right here is 48%, voltage 52.7, and we are using 674 watts from the battery. Like I said, all of your PV information is going to be right down here, and right down here, of course, it's going to give you all the graphs and stuff if you ever want to see all of that stuff. Okay, and again, the same thing. This is technically we're looking at the FLEXBOSS21. If I go up here and choose the GRIDBOSS, it's basically the same. The only thing that I've noticed different is it doesn't show you PV3 down here where all of your PV information is. It only shows PV1 and PV2. So I just leave it on the FLEXBOSS21. And that is basically it. All right, well, that is pretty much it. I know this video's gone on long enough, so I'm gonna start wrapping it up right now. There we go, we have the EG4 GRIDBOSS installed. All in all, it really wasn't too bad of an install, and I was just gonna go over maybe a couple suggestions that I may or may not have. I would highly suggest getting one of those wire troughs. That way, it just makes everything a little bit cleaner. You could either put the GRIDBOSS kind of right on top of it, or you could do like a lot of other people do is, if it is off of the wire trough just a little bit, then you just have a, like 4 or 5 short runs underneath here, and it kind of, honestly, it kind of makes it look like a nicer, cleaner install. If I were to do this different, that would be what I would do. And who knows, I might actually do that in the future. Just get a wire trough and redo the bottom side just so it looks a little bit nicer. Plus, if you have other things that you want to add, kind of like I have the EP cube right over here, I do want to add that to this, do the AC coupling. It would make it a little bit easier to install that as well, because you can just pipe and run everything right into the wire trough. You don't have to do any of the conduit and stuff that I did right here. And I already had most of the PVC conduit from other projects, so I just used it. The only other thing I need to do to tidy this up is I needed to grab 2 more of these clamps right here, and I need to add them right over there. That's pretty much it. Yeah, like I said, it was a pretty easy install. There was just a couple things, maybe I just kind of read into it too much with the share battery and parallel sync, stuff like that. I was just going off of what it said, you know, basically match what the picture shows below, and that's what I was trying to do when I really didn't even need to do that. And that was why I just kind of went back onto the web portal app to show you guys that, show you where I was kind of, I guess, running into a problem. And that way, if anybody else installs one of these and runs into like the same questions that I had, you know, hopefully that would answer those. Yeah, I think that is pretty much it. Our battery is kind of low right now, so I did have to switch back over to grid, and I am just kind of trickle charging right now, and of course pulling a little bit from the grid. I mean, it happens sometimes. Right now it's like January 9th or 10th. I mean, the sun's real low in the sky and we don't get much sun, and if you've seen my past videos, I've got a whole crap ton of trees in my yard, so it's not really feasible for me to be completely off grid right now unless I get rid of those trees, which I'm kind of leaning on getting rid of those trees, because then I think I could run basically forever off grid. Anyway, that's something later on down in the future. All right, that's it. I'm gonna stop talking. If anybody has any questions, comments, or concerns, make sure you put those down in the comment section. If this video was helpful in any way possible, make sure you like that smash button on your way out, and I will see you on the next. All right, so there's a million different ways, well, not a million, but there's a few different ways that, alrighty, it is like 9 or 10 days later. No. You either gotta stay down here or you gotta hop down. Which one is it gonna be? Okay. All right, it's like 9 or